What if the narrative you've always accepted about the British royal family was merely a facade? Behind the regal crowns, opulent carriages, and meticulously staged smiles, there exists a clandestine archive filled with hidden heirs, obscured scandals, prohibited documents, and fortunes concealed right before our eyes. For over 3 centuries, the monarchy has mastered the delicate art of shrouding the truth in a veil of secrecy. But now, the curtain is drawn back. These are not mere royal secrets, they are profound deceptions, and millions have been led to believe them. This is the concealed history they never wished for you to uncover. We will reveal 33 of the most significant royal cover-ups, now exposed to the light. Before we embark on this captivating journey, if you're intrigued by unmasking royal facades and exploring narratives that have been swept under the rug of history classes, hit subscribe for more of these hidden chapters. And while you're with us, leave a comment below. Where are you tuning in from? Is it midnight in Manchester or a bright morning in Singapore? I'm eager to hear from those of you stay up late unraveling royal mysteries. In this tale, we encounter the infamous warming pan baby, a curious narrative steeped in the fog of British royal lore. It all begins not with a birth, but with a fireplace, specifically a copper warming pan. This item, traditionally used to warm a royal bed during the frigid English winters, holds within it a secret tale. In a chilling December of 1688, it is said that instead of a typical birth, a child was secretly smuggled into the Queen's bedchamber, passed off as the true Catholic heir to the English throne. This story, despite its fairy tale charm, was a fabrication conjured by Protestant nobles intent on dethroning James II. But the intrigue doesn't end there. After the Glorious Revolution, the throne was claimed by William and Mary, followed by Queen Anne and the Hanoverian line, outsiders with dubious claims but solid Protestant ties. Fast forward to 1707, when the Act of Union solidified a new narrative, one that included the erasure of James Francis Edward, dubbed the Old Pretender. According to this narrative, he was nothing more than a pretender, an impostor smuggled in a warming pan, as if orchestrated by a cunning stage manager. Remarkably, numerous eyewitnesses, including prominent Protestant nobles and attending midwives, bore testament to a birth that had indeed taken place. Yet, the momentum of the fabricated story was too potent to halt. The warming pan baby narrative proved too valuable, perpetuated over the following century and a half. With each Jacobite uprising or claim from an exiled Stuart, the tale was resurrected. Even George III, a century later, relied on this myth, citing it to support the Hanoverian claim to the throne. State-sponsored publications derisively referred to James Francis Edward as the warming pan brat. It was not until the late 19th century that established historians finally recognized the chilling truth. The story of the warming pan baby was a convenient illusion for political ends. And yet, let that sink in. A single baby, a warming pan, and a bedchamber orchestrated the delegitimization of an entire lineage. Ultimately, this cover-up was less about obscuring a false birth and more about pushing aside a legitimate one, suggesting that the rightful heir was meticulously erased from history by a relentless propaganda machine. This revelation compels us to ponder what else lay buried within those tumultuous eras of regal transformations. What other truths remain hidden in the shadows? What stories might have burned away in the glowing embers of fireplaces or been rewritten under the guise of approval? Perhaps an answer resides in the poignant saga of a queen trapped within her marriage, a prisoner of her own reality. In this intriguing chapter of history, we turn our attention to Sophia Dorothea, the often forgotten wife of George I. While George I is remembered as the first German king of Great Britain, stoic, unassuming, a paradigm of Protestant virtue, behind the facade of regal propriety lay a most unsettling truth. his wife had vanished from history. Officially, she chose a life of quiet retreat, stepping back as if a true queen uninterested in the intrigues of court. However, the reality was much darker. In 1694, George accused her of infidelity, a claim steeped in irony given his own scandalous behaviour with numerous mistresses. The true reason for her disappearance was rooted in her political significance. Sophia possessed an independence and popularity that made her a liability in George's eyes. Thus, she was discreetly exiled to Alden House, a secluded estate in Lower Saxony, where she languished for 32 long years. Not a palace, but a gilded prison, she was stripped of her maternal rights, her identity erased from official records, and her correspondence intercepted. The world was told she resided in solitude, a life of mere meditation. Her death in 1726 passed with little fanfare, with George I refusing to acknowledge her funeral, even though they were still legally married. Her remains were buried in secret, effectively reducing her to a mere footnote in the annals of history. For 3 decades, she languished without trial, a spectre in the palace corridors. Only much later, as personal letters and estate documents came to light, did the truth emerge. Sophia was silenced, not for unfaithfulness, but for seeking freedom from a stifling marriage. She craved respect, yet received only a legacy marred by humiliation. The British monarchy perpetuated the myth. Even after George I's death, historians accepted the official line that depicted her as a sickly spouse rather than a captive. Her children were raised to believe her unworthy, effectively erasing her from memory. This cover-up endured, not merely to defend a marriage, but to safeguard the image of a moral monarchy. A queen who defied convention, who exposed harsh truths, was simply too dangerous. But let us not forget that Sophia Dorothea was not alone in the shadows of history. Her son, who ascended to the throne, mastered the art of concealing royal transgressions. As we delve deeper into these hidden narratives, it's evident there's much more to uncover beneath the ornate surface of royal life. If you find yourself fascinated by these untold stories, consider subscribing to our channel. And while we are unveiling the secrets of the past, share your location and time in the comments below. Whether you're nocturnally scrolling in New York or commuting in Cape Town, let's connect through this journey into hidden royal histories. 3. The hidden lives of George II and his mistresses. George II is often painted as the dullest of the Hanoverians, a label not taken lightly. His existence was marked by routine, predictability, almost a caricature of a monarch. Yet beneath this mundane surface lay a complex world of courtly pleasures, clandestine favoritism, and a private life that the royal establishment sought to meticulously conceal. Enter the mistresses, more accurately, a web of them. The public's perception of George II's unwavering devotion to Queen Caroline wasn't just well regarded. It became a powerful tool. Their marriage was lauded as a shining example of domestic harmony, an exceptionally romantic royal narrative. Caroline was a woman of sharp intellect and political savvy, every bit more capable than George himself. The public persona of their relationship was crafted with precision. He cherished her, she tempered him. Together they appeared as an ideal royal pairing. Yet in the shadows of the palace, George held a discreet but authentic arrangement with a number of mistresses. This wasn't the extravagant courtship we might expect from a Louis XIV, but rather a restrained, bureaucratically managed affair. Think of it as the monarchy's own version of HR-compliant infidelity. At the forefront was Henrietta Howard, a lady recognized for her intelligence, elegance, and political neutrality. She resided in her own quarters and served as a lady of the bedchamber to Queen Caroline, awkwardly accepted due to her harmless nature. This was the linchpin of the entire endeavor: absence of scandal. No letters should ever leak, No rumors should explode. Every detail of George II's extramarital escapades was orchestrated to remain far from the watchful eyes of the media and gossipers. It has since come to light that Queen Caroline was well aware of his indiscretions and utilized her power strategically to ensure minimal drama. She comprehended a truth that the public was meant to overlook. The monarchy's strength hinged on maintaining a facade rather than revealing honest reality. This cover-up went beyond mere personal embarrassment. George II's preferential treatment towards certain mistresses had tangible political implications for their families. Appointments, pensions, and titles quietly distributed in the shadows of the royal bedchamber, constituting a form of soft corruption that thrived as long as silence prevailed. Even after Caroline's death in 1737, George continued his private arrangements, albeit with increased secrecy. Any courtier daring to acknowledge the situation faced the threat of exile. Discussions about his personal affairs were heavily censored, and court portraits often omitted specific women completely. Official narratives depicted George II as a devoted widower, mourning his wife while tending to roses. Not quite the complete picture. Today, we can trace the intricate network of influence forged by his mistresses. Unexpected promotions, elusive royal grants, and silent alliances. Back then, however, the enforcement of silence extended across political, social, and historical realms. The tale of the loyal, sometimes volatile yet ultimately decent George endured because the royal machinery ensured that the other half of his narrative remained shrouded in secrecy. Yet, not all secrets arise from passion. Some stem from dysfunction, raw and disturbingly human, like the hidden truth about George's father that instigated a cover-up stretching through tumultuous revolutions. In the shadows of history lies the story of King George III, a tale of quiet beginnings that spiraled into chaos. It began with subtle signs, a shift in demeanor, a sudden twitch, and a night flooded with incoherent words. Yet, it soon became clear, the monarch was truly unwell. Known in American history as the tyrant of the Revolution, George was, in essence, a deeply loyal ruler, dutiful and genuinely passionate about his service to the nation. He pored over every letter that crossed his desk, mingled with his subjects, and resolutely refused to leave his homeland. But behind the steady facade lay a man grappling with a darkness more unsettling than mere political strife, a madness that eluded the utterance of its name. The royal court devised a facade to shield their king from the public eye. The palace's strategy was one of minimization and diversion. Following his first severe episode in 1788, the media spun tales of a mere indisposition or fleeting fever, while official announcements cited him as occupied with health matters, as if his honor had merely been sprained. Yet, behind those gilded doors, George was held captive by his own mind, babbling for hours, engulfed in hallucinations and staggering confusion. He was unable to sign his name or even recognize familiar faces, rendering him, by today's standards, wholly incapacitated. Those in power, from physicians to Parliament, were all too aware of his tragic state, but the populace was fed a comforting myth that the king was merely resting. Speculations ran wild, suggesting overwork or even mystical afflictions, but the harsh reality that the king was neurologically unfit to lead was systematically suppressed. His treatment was equally concealed, involving painful restraints, bloodletting, and isolation, all under the careful gaze of entrusted physicians, their meticulous notes hidden away for decades. Only centuries later would these truths emerge, revealing a ruler crumbling slowly as his handlers quarreled over authority in his name. By 1811, after a series of relapses, Parliament had to intervene, establishing a regency under his son, who would become George IV. Yet even then, the narrative made room for hope, suggesting a potential recovery for George III. Portraits depicted him in contemplative poses amidst serene gardens, while public remarks alluded to his melancholic retreat. Even in his abject incapacity, the myth of a composed king endured. Today, medical historians theorize that George suffered from porphyria, a rare genetic illness targeting the nervous system, with some positing a possible bipolar disorder or a blend of both. Yet such diagnoses were non-existent in the 18th century, just as the notion of a divinely ordained king suffering from mental illness was unspeakable. The question looms large: why the elaborate charade? A monarch grappling with madness threatened to unravel the very foundations of royalty. If a king could lose his sanity, then the monarchical system, founded on bloodlines, inheritance, and sacred legitimacy, appeared frail, human, and vulnerable, which simply could not be tolerated. George III narrative was not isolated. Numerous royals faced similar shadows, but his situation set a treacherous precedent. Illness was not confronted. It was cloaked in secrecy, not treated, but concealed. This pattern of denial would echo through generations of royalty, especially when illness proved fatal, and the truth of death was too burdensome to declare. 5. George IV, a man of contradiction in a powdered wig, was notorious for his extravagant lifestyle, often teetering on the brink of financial ruin. His indulgence in pageantry was countered by a profound aversion to responsibility. Yet the most significant secret he harbored had nothing to do with his lavish tastes. It revolved around a woman, a clandestine wedding, and a deception that would take years to unravel. This woman, Maria Fitzherbert, was a twice-widowed Roman Catholic who, in 1785, privately married the Prince of Wales. However, there was a critical flaw, due to the Royal Marriages Act of 1772, that union was illegal without the king's consent, which was impossible to obtain from George III, a staunch opponent of Catholic unions. Consequently, the marriage was denied, suppressed, and systematically erased. The Crown insisted that their relationship was a simple romantic affair, dismissing any rumors and portraying Maria as merely a caregiver to the troubled prince. When George eventually wed Caroline of Brunswick in 1795, it was publicly recorded as his first marriage. Yet, Maria retained all evidence of their union, the wedding certificate, love letters, and promises, refusing to consider their marriage illegitimate. Deeply devout and knowledgeable in legal matters, Maria secured the documents in a bank vault, stipulating they remain sealed until after her demise. Meanwhile, even as king, George IV oscillated between his life with Caroline and his affection for Maria, frequently claiming her as his true wife in private. Their complex relationship endured, amidst palace denials and historical sanitization. Newspapers prudently skirted around speculation, while George, both sentimental and politically savvy, ensured no truths leaked before his departure in 1830. It was only then that the Fitzherbert documents came to light, revealing undeniable proof of his secret marriage, a union that mockingly defied both Parliament and the Church. For over 4 decades, the monarchy had distorted the truth about its most prominent member's life. Why such an elaborate cover-up? Because a Catholic marriage would not only embarrass the crown, it was seen as treasonous and could have jeopardized George's claim to the throne, potentially catapulting the monarchy into chaos. Thus, the truth was buried, hidden from the public eye. Yet the tale doesn't end with George IV's secretive union. What unfolded next would intertwine scandal and parliamentary maneuvering, leading to the erasure of a queen from historical memory altogether. In this chronicle, we delve into the tumultuous tale of Queen Caroline, the ill-fated wife of George IV. If George's life echoed the thundering beats of a Shakespearean tragedy, then his relationship with Caroline of Brunswick stood as its most painful chapter, a torrid clash of heart and public perception. Yet, Hidden within the shadows of history lies an astonishing truth: how the powers that be, including the monarchy, conspired to erase Caroline from the hearts of the nation. Caroline was a character of striking contrast. Her loud demeanour, awkward charm, and intense popularity set against George's gaudy attire and unfulfilled aspirations for affection. From the very beginning, their union was marked by disdain, a marriage forged solely to secure an heir and stabilize royal finances. Mere months after their wedding, they found themselves estranged, with Caroline practically exiled, living abroad amid whispers of her many male companions. It was then that George, now the Prince Regent and later crowned king, unleashed a calculated campaign against her. A clandestine operation emerged, the Milan Commission, tasked with uncovering evidence of her alleged infidelity. The result? An avalanche of scandalous testimonies and dubious claims. Instead of resolving matters discreetly, George opted for spectacle. In the year 1820, right before his accession, the Pains and Penalties Bill was introduced in Parliament, a legislative manoeuvre aimed at stripping Caroline of her title based on supposed infidelity. But it unfolded into an unexpected drama, a media frenzy. Caroline's return to Britain ignited fervent public support as she valiantly defended her honour. Crowds rallied behind her, booing George and celebrating her as a victim of tyranny. The atmosphere buzzed in crowded pubs and theatres, as people recognised the injustice at play. Ultimately, public outcry led to the withdrawal of the bill, but the damage to the monarchy's reputation was irreversible. In response, the palace chose a chilling strategy: silence. Caroline was barred from George IV's coronation. She was shunned at Westminster Abbey. Her death followed under mysterious conditions, marred by state meddling at her funeral. Subsequently, her legacy was almost entirely erased from historical narratives. The official accounts transformed her into a mere footnote, a difficult woman and an unloved queen, relegating her story to obscurity. Yet, secret letters and fervent newspaper articles unravelled a different narrative. By resolutely refusing to be erased, Caroline hovered just above the crumbling illusion of a moral monarchy. And if her existence stood as a threat, it was further accentuated by an unsettling secret: an ominous genetic legacy ensconced within the bloodstream of Britain's most powerful woman. In the realm of history, few figures are as fascinating and complex as Queen Victoria, who, despite her ironclad image and public persona, held a secret that lurked beyond the elegance of her portraits. This wasn't a scandal of scandalous affairs or political missteps. Rather, it was an invisible flaw, a genetic twist of fate. Queen Victoria was a carrier of haemophilia, a cursed thread that wove itself through the fabric of European royal families, haunting them like an unseen spectre. For decades, the British royal family maintained a veil of silence over this hereditary disease that left young princes fragile and vulnerable, often succumbing to injuries that should have been trivial. Within the confines of the palace, the truth remained buried, as whispers about delicate princes were masked by euphemistic tales of accidents and untimely deaths. The word haemophilia never graced the official narratives during her reign, a deliberate omission that obscured the reality of this royal health crisis. Victoria herself may have never grasped the full medical implications of her condition, yet she bore 9 children, several of whom carried the same genetic mark. Among them was her son Leopold, who suffered greatly, while her daughters unwittingly introduced the disease into the royal circles of Germany, Russia, and Spain, where it wreaked havoc among heirs. As the years passed, minor injuries turned tragic, leading to a grim unfolding of events that threatened the very foundation of monarchies clinging to the notion of divine right. The palace's emphasis on maintaining Victoria's image as the venerable matriarch of Europe masked the slow-motion calamity her lineage faced. New scientific revelations in the early 20th century compelled historians to connect the unsettling dots, even as royal biographers proceeded cautiously, respectful of the family's reluctance to acknowledge the haemophilia connection. Official lineage records were discreetly manipulated, obscuring the truth in a haze of discretion and denial. It wasn't until after Victoria's passing that her legacy was fully illuminated through genetic evidence, revealing her as the original bearer of a condition that had led to significant dynastic upheavals. Most notably, her grandson, Russian Tsarevich Alexei, would tragically embody the curse and become a key player in the downfall of the Romanovs. Interestingly, the British media continued to skirt around the reality of her genetic legacy, hesitant to suggest that even a queen could unintentionally harbour a lethal secret within her blood. And while Victoria's hidden truth emerged, another layer of deception surrounded her beloved Albert, whose fate was meticulously shielded, not by genetics, but by the empire's unwavering commitment to uphold its legendary narrative. As the story unfolds, we delve into the real circumstances surrounding the death of Prince Albert. Queen Victoria, in her profound grief, declared that he succumbed to typhoid fever, a narrative she reinforced with passionate insistence. The official account paints a tragic picture, that Albert perished in December 1861 after a swift battle with fever, likely contracted during his noble service amidst the cold, damp British winter. It reads like a pristine tragedy, a devoted prince consort, claimed by time too soon. Yet, modern historians have unearthed a more complex truth. They suggest his demise stemmed from a chronic illness, possibly a variant of Crohn's disease or stomach cancer, conditions that had silently plagued Albert long before that fateful winter. His correspondence hints at ongoing struggles with symptoms like fatigue and digestive discomfort, presenting a reality far removed from a sudden bout of fever. However, in the 19th century, typhoid offered a more palatable conclusion, one that resonated with dignity and nobility. Victoria had compelling motivations to advocate for this narrative. On a political front, it shielded Albert from allegations of weakness, while symbolically, it immortalized him as a tragic hero, a figure brought down not by infirmity but by steadfast service to the empire. Victoria constructed a poignant identity for Albert around this version, portraying herself as a grieving widow draped in black, married in spirit to a man who transcended his earthly role. To challenge the accepted cause of death would equate to questioning her profound sorrow and her authority as queen. Even as medical insight advanced in the late 1800s, the palace steadfastly avoided revisiting this narrative. Biographers who proposed alternative explanations faced ostracism, while access to personal letters and diaries was tightly controlled. The portrayal of Prince Albert as vigorous and noble remained sacrosanct for years. Yet, the signs of his long-term ailment lay evident to those nearest him, including his physicians, who noted his declining health in private, but never dared to contest the public narrative. It wasn't until the release of private documents in the 20th century that historians began to uncover the fissures in the official account. So, why cling to this facade? Albert wasn't just a prince. He was a construct of monarchy's moral fabric, a beacon of contemporary royal virtue. If he had succumbed to a poorly understood chronic condition, the image of the relentless moral compass guiding the monarchy might have faltered. The narrative, then, held more weight than truth itself. In the pursuit of legacy, particularly when supporting a sprawling empire, it sometimes proves simpler to obscure the reality of a man's ailing health rather than confront the implications. However, the palace's veil of secrecy extended beyond mere illness. The underlying tensions revealed that sometimes the issue at hand was not merely who passed away, but who survived against all odds, against societal expectations. 9. The hidden saga of Prince Leopold, Duke of Albany, unfolds like a whisper among the echoes of history. Born in 1853, the younger son of Queen Victoria, he was both a cherished child and a delicate creature, marked from birth by a frail constitution and a gentle soul. To the world, he embodied the image of a sickly yet beloved royal, a scholarly figure, grappling with intellect inherited from his father and the profound emotional pulse of his mother. Yet, beneath this exterior lay a profound and unspoken truth that loomed over his life like a dark cloud, a secret illness that would cast a long shadow over the generations to follow. This illness was haemophilia, a hereditary affliction that would quietly haunt Queen Victoria's lineage. In an era where royal dignity was paramount, the monarchy took extraordinary measures to suppress the truth of Leopold's condition. Official statements painted him as merely fragile, while reports of his minor injuries were glossed over as mere accidents. His absence from the expected military pursuits associated with royal sons was explained through a blend of euphemisms, a constitutional weakness, a nervous complaint, or simply the need for rest. Yet, the public remained oblivious to the reality that Leopold's blood lacked the ability to clot. A scraped knee could lead to weeks of suffering, and a simple fall could turn fatal. He was ensnared in a relentless contradiction, a young man expected to embody the strength of royal masculinity while his body betrayed him at every turn. The term haemophilia was never uttered. It represented not just a medical diagnosis, but a scandalous blemish on the royal lineage, an imperfection within the bloodline of a revered monarch. Acknowledging Leopold's condition would cast a shadow on Queen Victoria herself, questions the crown was unprepared to face. Instead, they crafted a narrative of resilience. Leopold was awarded honorary military ranks, yet never permitted to engage in active duty. His life was carefully orchestrated, cloaked in the guise of concern for his health. His swift marriage to Princess Helena of Waldeck and Pyrmont aimed to project the image of a vigorous prince fulfilling royal expectations. When he passed away at the tender age of 30 in 1884 due to a tragic fall resulting in internal bleeding, the official statement labelled it a mere accident. However, the real story was already being meticulously concealed. His medical documents were locked away, discussions regarding his symptoms were purged from public records, while the monarchy steeled itself for the slow unravelling of their carefully woven deception. By then, other royal infants and grandchildren were beginning to showcase signs of haemophilia, an alarming trend spreading through Germany, Spain, and, most ominously, Russia. Leopold had unwittingly become a case study for the royal approach to inherited ailments: conceal, euphemize, and rewrite the narrative before questions could arise about why a vibrant young prince so frequently found himself relegated to the periphery. Yet, amidst the veils of secrecy surrounding Leopold's death, another far more scandalous incident lay in waiting, one that involved a royal daughter, an illegitimate child, and a family intent on simulating normalcy in the wake of an undeniable truth. In the shadows of history lies the enigmatic tale of Princess Louise, the sixth child and fourth daughter of Queen Victoria. Emanating an independent spirit and artistic flair, she maneuvered through the constraints of her royal upbringing, often drawing wary glances from the rigid courtiers around her. But more than her progressive ideas or her sculpting pursuits, it was a relentless rumor that chilled the palace. Whispers of a child born out of wedlock, meticulously concealed yet unmistakably persistent. This narrative, once confined to hushed court conversations, has since been revived in modern scholarship and centers around a young man named Henry. Allegedly born in 1866, when Louise was merely 18, Henry's existence is attributed to a liaison with her arts mentor, the dashing Scottish sculptor Walter Stirling, or perhaps the more enigmatic Joseph Edgar Boom, who was also her teacher. In either scenario, this attachment proves scandalous. The princess, unmarried and royal in an era that demanded perfection, could not be allowed the luxury of a mistake. So the palace, in its usual clandestine fashion, took measures to erase any trace of the supposed child. Henry, it is said, was quietly adopted by a family serving the royal household, with birth records altered or sealed away, and letters exchanged between Louise and her tutors vanished into thin air. For over a century, royal documents from her youth remain hidden, some still cloaked in secrecy today. The family linked to this alleged child was sworn to silence, preserving the facade until the early 20th century, when researchers cautiously began putting together the fragments of a story long shrouded in mystery. They discovered a young man of remarkable education and ties to royal pensions, who had enjoyed discreet sponsorship throughout his life. Letters referring to Louise's child emerged, couched in euphemistic codes. An intriguing photograph surfaced as well, presenting a boy whose features strikingly mirrored those of Prince Arthur, Louise's brother. The possibility of genetic connections was suggested, but formal tests never materialized. Throughout it all, the palace remained reticent. To this day, the British monarchy has never publicly acknowledged the potential that one of Queen Victoria's daughters had a child outside marriage. While the tale remains formally unsubstantiated, mounting circumstantial evidence with each new archival discovery hints at truths too significant to dismiss. The lengths taken to obscure this narrative, particularly from an institution famed for its need to document, suggest a deeper honesty lies beneath the surface, one that reveals a reality too perilous for the monarchy to confront. Louise was envisioned as the epitome of the modern royal woman, cultured, creative, dignified. To birth an illegitimate child would shatter that carefully crafted image in Victorian England's unforgiving social climate. Thus, like many royal tales, this one was meticulously curated, categorized under mere rumor. Not because it lacked veracity, but because admitting the truth could unleash chaos. Yet, this saga was just one of many hidden transformations unfolding behind palace walls. The next scandal would not simply alter a family's name, it would obliterate their entire identity. In the summer of 1917, against the backdrop of the First World War and swelling anti-German feelings in Britain, a pivotal shift occurred. King George V, amid the tumult, made a seemingly subtle but far-reaching decision. He renamed the royal house. Just like that, the once proud house of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, entrenched in British history since Queen Victoria wed Prince Albert, was transformed into the House of Windsor. Officially, this was a vital step to align the monarchy with the British populace during wartime. Yet, this renaming was just the surface of a deeper narrative, a deliberate concealment of the monarchy's profound German roots. In 1917, as Britain waged war against the German Empire, towns faced relentless bombings, and young soldiers fell by the thousands. Anti-German hysteria enveloped the nation, with riots breaking out and nationalistic fervor fueled by the press. Anything bearing a German name became vulnerable, prompting looting and public outcry against those perceived as foreign. Even the royal family, nestled in their grand estates, found themselves ensnared in the rising tide of anger. And therein lay the core issue. Their lineage was unmistakably German. King George V's ancestry weaved a complex tapestry of continental connections, with a Danish mother and a German wife, as well as cousins sitting on thrones in Germany and Russia. His own last name, Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, was a glaring emblem of German nobility. Tension escalated when a German bomber, the Gotha G4, unleashed destruction on London, leading to headlines that screamed of the attack. The absurd connection between the British king and a German warplane became impossible to overlook. In an unprecedented act, George V engaged in an unusual form of public relations management. He announced that his family would now be recognized as the House of Windsor, a name which resonated with English heritage, conveniently drawn from Windsor Castle, a site rich in national symbolism. Yet, unmentioned in this proclamation was the quiet alteration of their personal surnames. Battenbergs evolved into Mountbattens, and the Germanic text became Cambridge's. Even Louis Mountbatten, the future uncle of Prince Philip, reshaped his name to shed any resemblance to Prussian lineage. The public largely embraced this change, but behind the facade lay a calculated effort to obscure foreign bloodlines, shrouded in patriotic sentiment. The palace engaged in obfuscation, destroying or concealing documents that could illuminate their heritage. Correspondence vanished, and photographs mysteriously disappeared from family albums. It was only years later that historians began to unravel the depth of this transformation, a renaming that mirrored an entire reimagining of self, all in the name of survival. Yet, even a name change has its limits. The urgency deepened when confronted with a child who threatened to append the carefully constructed illusion of royal perfection. The solution was to distance him, to obscure his existence from the public eye, leaving him hidden enough to fade into obscurity. In the shadows of royal history lies the story of Prince John, the fifth son of King George V and Queen Mary. Born in 1905, he arrived into a world of privilege and adoration. Yet, as he entered his adolescence, this young prince became a phantom, fading from the public eye, unmentioned in the lifelong legacy of the monarchy. For many years, the knowledge of his existence was a secret, with whispers of a short life spent in anonymity due to health issues. But the truth was far more disconcerting than the institution would reveal. Prince John suffered from epilepsy and autism, conditions that, in the early 1900s, were shrouded in ignorance and stigma. In a royal family that valued its flawless facade, John's neurodivergence was perceived as a liability. At merely 11 years old, he was exiled from court life, sequestered at Wood Farm on the Sandringham estate, an invisible member of the royal family. After his removal, he vanished from public life. No photographs were taken, and he was absent from family gatherings and public ceremonies, disappearing entirely from media recognition. In the confines of family discussions, opinions of him diverged greatly. Some relatives reminisced about John's kind spirit and playful nature. Others regarded his conditions as a source of shame. Queen Mary, known for her stoic temperament, seldom sought him out, while King George V infamously likened him to an animal in a private comment, illuminating the era's harsh perceptions. When Prince John died at the tender age of 13 in 1919 after a severe seizure, the palace responded with chilling indifference. A terse announcement marked his passing, yet there would be no state funeral, no public mourning, nor acknowledgement of his true struggles. His burial was secluded and unnoticed, buried beneath layers of royal silence. It was not until the late 20th century that the veil was lifted by declassified letters and medical records, revealing the tragic truth of his existence that had been so meticulously concealed to maintain a pristine royal image. Today, we see a shift in understanding John's legacy. Documentaries and books have emerged, painting him as a poignant reminder of how institutions may forsake those most vulnerable in a bid for public respectability. Yet, in his time, he was eradicated from memory. And if that evokes discomfort, stay tuned for the unsettling tale of the king whose death was orchestrated to fill the morning headlines. On the fateful evening of January 20th, 1936, a quiet storm brewed within the walls of Sandringham House as King George V faced his final moments. Official accounts depict a serene passing, enveloped in the embrace of family at precisely 11:55 p.m., the epitome of a dignified royal farewell. However, the truth of that night, long hidden, unfolded through the chilling revelations of Lord Dawson of Penn, the king's physician. His journals, sealed away for decades, exposed a meticulously orchestrated mercy killing, executed with chilling intent, to ensure the king's death was aligned with the morning editions of respectable papers rather than the scandalous evening tabloids. In stark clinical language, Dawson detailed the administration of potent doses of morphine and cocaine, not for alleviation of pain, but as tools for hastening the inevitable. This act, shrouded in secrecy, maintained its grip on the public narrative for 50 years, with the royal family never acknowledging the physician's actions. The close-knit circle of the royal household chose silence, while the media, adhering to a code of respect for the monarchy, never questioned the official story. It wasn't until 1986, when Dawson's diary finally emerged, revealing his cold calculus. He believed the king's natural demise was imminent, yet deemed it more fitting for the life-ending moment to coincide with the headlines of the Times. The intention wasn't compassion. It was about public relations masquerading as dignity. The absence of broader medical consultation or public scrutiny starkly illustrated the priority placed on royal image over human experience. The revelation sparked a wave of reinterpretation among historians. Some heralded the event as a mercy, while others lauded its perceived dignity. Yet, at its core, the unsettling truth remained. The death of George V was accelerated to safeguard the monarchy's reputation. This raises profound questions about the lengths to which the royal narrative stretches. How often have royal stories been exquisitely crafted? What layers of grief are rehearsed for public consumption? Dawson's calculated actions reveal a fundamental conflict between the monarchy as a human institution and the monarchy as a carefully curated spectacle. As the curtain falls on one act, the show must carry on, turning even the moment of death into a guiding script. If a king can be silenced and defined within the confines of night, what other historical truths might the palace choose to obscure? As it happens, quite a lot, like the two royal relatives erased from the narrative, living reminders that not all histories are told. In the hushed halls of the Royal Earlswood Hospital in Surrey, two women spent their lives cloaked in secrecy. Nerissa and Catherine Bowes-Lyon, nieces of the Queen Mother and first cousins to Queen Elizabeth II, lived and ultimately died largely unnoticed by the world. Their existence was concealed from public eye, hidden away due to their developmental disabilities diagnosed in childhood. As the years rolled by, they were discreetly relocated from private care to a state institution, ultimately finding themselves at Earlswood by the early 1940s, where they would reside for decades. Remarkably, the official royal narrative declared them deceased. In the 1963 edition of Burke's Peerage, a prominent genealogical record, both sisters were erroneously marked as dead, an untruth perpetuated for over 30 years. Strikingly, no royal family member is known to have visited them, and their lives were shrouded in neglect. Their care wasn't funded by the palace, although it's believed they survived on meagre funds from a family trust. Within Earlswood, the staff remained oblivious to their royal bloodline for years. The facade began to crumble in the 1980s when a journalist from the Daily Express unearthed their names in hospital records, linking them back to the royal family. The revelation was staggering. Two royal cousins alive, living in obscurity while the monarchy publicly grieved their loss. This shocking disclosure occurred during a time when Princess Diana was famously championing respect for individuals with disabilities. Yet, behind the curtain, the palace had expunged its own kin. When the story broke in 1987, a wave of discomfort washed over the public. There were no formal apologies or clarifications, merely vague expressions of sympathy. Palace representatives insisted that the Queen Mother believed the sisters were receiving proper care and that the listing of their deaths in Burke's was merely a mistake, one that had persisted for decades and been repeatedly published. To this day, questions linger about the cover-up. Who decided to declare them dead? Why was this truth never rectified? And why did no senior royals, even those with health-related charitable interests, acknowledge their lives? Nerissa passed away in 1986, buried in a grave marked by mere plastic and tape. Catherine lived until 2014, slipping away in obscurity long after the media's gaze had moved on. Their story is a haunting reminder of one of the most troubling royal cover-ups, the systemic erasure of the vulnerable. It was not the first time the monarchy altered its history, nor would it be the last. What followed would be an even more perilous tale, a king who not only abandoned his throne but also risked betraying his country. In the annals of history, one figure stands out, a king never crowned, Edward VIII, whose choice to forsake his throne for love is etched in our memory. A romantic tragedy perfectly captured in the sepia-toned imagery of Edward's melancholic departure from Buckingham Palace, embodying heartbreak and nobility. This is the narrative we are led to believe. Yet, beneath the enchanting lore of his abdication lies a shadowy truth, one that the British establishment has labored for years to conceal. Edward didn't merely fall for Wallis Simpson. He developed a troubling admiration for the Nazis. The full magnitude of his affiliations remained hidden until long after the smoke of World War II cleared. During the conflict, he was exiled to the Bahamas, portrayed as enjoying a noble retirement while in reality, he was being strategically sidelined, rendered harmless due to his growing liability. The years preceding the war reveal an Edward who openly commended Hitler's regime, mingling with Nazi officials and visiting Germany. In 1937, just a year following his abdication, he and Wallis toured Germany, encountering high-ranking Nazis, including Hitler himself. Documented photographs and footage undeniably exist, yet royal biographies conveniently brush these interactions aside, describing the trip as a regrettable holiday rather than the public relations catastrophe it was. But the revelations continue. Declassified intelligence, notably the notorious Marburg files unearthed by Allied troops in 1945, indicate Edward's admiration ran deeper. Reports suggest he envisioned a return to the throne amidst a German triumph, advocating for bombing British cities to cripple morale, and compelling Churchill's government towards peace negotiations. The Nazis even devised Operation Willy, a plan to reinstate Edward as a puppet king following an invasion of Britain. When the Marburg files surfaced, the British government was thrown into disarray. Officials quickly acted to suppress this information, pressuring their American and French counterparts to redact crucial details. For decades, historians were barred from accessing the evidence. The official narrative continued to depict Edward as merely misguided and politically naive, deflecting the notion of treason. As fresh evidence emerged, eyewitness accounts and intercepted communications, concerns regarding Edward's political acumen transformed the perception of his abdication from a noble sacrifice into a calculated maneuver designed to shield the crown from embarrassment and possible betrayal. Even now, whispers of this tale linger, with some royal analysts claiming he was simply manipulated by the Nazis, a pawn in their game. Yet, while Britain braced itself for war, its former king was entwined with fascism, and the most astonishing aspect remains how long this truth remained suppressed. The cover-up extended beyond Edward. His wife, Wallis Simpson, the American divorcee turned Duchess of Windsor, had her own secrets, carefully shielded by the crown. In the shadows of history lies the enigmatic figure of Wallis Simpson, a socialite, a divorcee, and the Duchess of Windsor. Yet, she embodied a far deeper dilemma. To the British royal family, she posed not just an unconventional romantic entanglement, but a significant challenge for the intelligence services, the media, and the very fabric of monarchy's storied legacy. Once her romance with Edward VIII started capturing public attention, Wallis was not merely perceived as a woman, but as a formidable threat that demanded control. The official narrative was neatly presented. The British establishment condemned Wallis on the basis of morality and religion. An American with 2 divorces under her belt, she was deemed unworthy of the royal marriage. This simplistic story painted Edward's abdication as a noble sacrifice, a portrayal that cast the royal family in a principled light. However, it elegantly obscured the more profound apprehensions surrounding her. For Wallis Simpson was not merely a controversial character. She was a focal point of intrigue monitored well before the abdication crisis erupted. By the mid-1930s, both MI5 and their international allies, notably the French and American intelligence agencies, were compiling extensive files. These weren't simple catalogues of rumor. They encompassed intercepted messages, reports from informants, and discreet surveillance details. The findings were troubling for the British government and disruptive to the royal narrative. Allegations suggested Wallis had close ties to several Nazi officials, alongside enduring but unverified claims of an affair with a senior German diplomat. Her social circle was filled with influential figures, some of whom faced their own investigations. Yet, when the relationship reached a boiling point, the British press remained silent. This was not due to ignorance. Foreign publications buzzed with speculation. Rather, it stemmed from a clandestine agreement between the palace and newspaper executives, a gentleman's pact designed to suppress the scandal until it could be controlled. It transcended simple censorship. It was an effort of containment. After the abdication, the royal approach evolved from silence to sanitization. Intelligence files were suppressed, some destroyed, others sealed for decades under national security provisions. Official narratives of Wallis's life often glossed over vital details of her European connections during the war, framing her relationships as mere friendships while downplaying her political affiliations as misinterpreted. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, as a few files emerged into public view, the revelations were striking. MI5 noted her as promiscuous and possibly perilous, while American records highlighted her dealings with Nazi diplomats, alongside vague redactions indicating financial entanglements. Yet, the ambiguity was intentional. For 50 years, the monarchy sought to obfuscate the truth, a calculated effort to shield the institution from scandal. Today, the mysteries surrounding Wallis Simpson linger, expertly calculated to remain elusive. The royal family and British intelligence shared a singular interest, safeguarding the institution at any cost, even if that required reconstructing a duchess's past to erase politically charged elements. Curiously, the ultimate veil of secrecy would be illustrated just a few years later when a royal aircraft plummeted from the heavens during wartime, carrying secrets that are still buried beneath layers of classification. In the annals of history, one incident stands out as a haunting mystery: the 1942 plane crash of the Duke of Kent. On the fateful day of August 25th, a military aircraft met its tragic end on a desolate hillside near Dunbeath in Scotland, carrying Prince George, the Duke of Kent and the younger sibling of King George VI. Out of the 14 aboard, only one person emerged alive from the wreckage. The Royal Air Force pointed fingers at inclement weather and navigational blunders, chalking it up to misfortune in the midst of wartime. However, scrutiny reveals a narrative steeped in shadows and unspoken truths. Prince George was no ordinary royal. He was a figure of charm and modernity, the first Windsor to embrace a civil servant role and capture public fascination within the world of celebrity. By 1942, Britain was grappling with the throes of war, the royal family striving to project an image of solidarity, untouched by scandal. And then, with a sudden, tragic turn, George's aircraft plummeted from the heavens. From the outset, the story felt curated. Official reasons were vague, pointing to an unspecified mission shrouded in secrecy and lacking a clear destination or cargo manifest. The sole survivor, Flight Sergeant Andrew Jack, provided minimal insight before being silenced. Today, an air of mystery clings to the event, with crucial documents still locked away, designated as national security. What really drove the Duke of Kent to that plane, and who accompanied him? Speculation erupted almost immediately. Some whispers suggested he might have been engaged in secret peace talks with Nazi officials, mirroring the controversial affiliations of his brother, Edward. Others speculated that an unnamed passenger, perhaps a diplomat, had been aboard, their presence conveniently erased from the records. Rumors of sensitive materials being on board, valuables, documents, or messages, added to the enigma. Yet, curiously, these tales were neither substantiated nor wholly dismissed. Consider the crash site itself. The plane veered miles off course, flying alarmingly low. Early witnesses recounted chaos, claiming they were later discouraged from sharing what they had seen. An unsettling suggestion emerged that Prince George was found at the controls, a curious detail given his lack of piloting experience and the presence of trained RAF personnel. In record time, the narrative surrounding this tragedy was packaged and laid to rest. The funeral was subdued, inquiry stifled, and all that followed was a brief announcement from Buckingham Palace that swiftly faded into silence. For years, the royal archives concerning the Duke of Kent have remained largely elusive, with historians stumbling upon redacted documents and missing files, barriers to unearthing the truth. What lays beneath this veil of secrecy? It could be inconsequential, or perhaps something more unsettling, a wartime slip-up, unauthorized discussions, or internal disputes within the royal sphere. What is unequivocal is this: the official narrative was crafted to silence, not illuminate. Yet, the sorrow of such tragedies extended beyond the battlegrounds or the skies. Within the royal confines, love could be just as forbidden, held under tight control, and often rewritten. Ask the princess whose love was stifled, her letters buried alongside the truth. The echoes of this untold story linger, inviting us to probe deeper into the shadows of history. In the shadows of royal corridors, a tale unfolds: Princess Margaret, the vibrant sister of the Queen, who danced on the edge of tradition with her dazzling flair. This era, cloaked in protocol, witnessed her heart entwined with Group Captain Peter Townsend, a war hero whose charm was wrapped in an air of danger. He embodied the ideal for a young royal, sophisticated, devoted, but his divorce status cast a long shadow over their budding romance. In 1952, following the passing of her father, Margaret turned to Townsend, seeking solace and finding a love that blossomed amidst sorrow. Yet, as whispers of their relationship reached the palace, the stakes grew high. Marriage was on the horizon, but it spelled trouble, for Townsend was divorced, creating ripples that threatened the monarchy's stability. Back then, the Church of England, led by Margaret's sister, forbade union with a living ex-spouse, making the romance fraught with peril. With echoes of the abdication crisis still fresh, the palace acted swiftly, sending Townsend to Belgium under the guise of a job transfer, a guise that masked his true banishment. 2 years of separation ensued, with the royals hoping public opinion might shift in their favour or, perhaps with the hope, their passion would wane. During this period, Margaret faced unyielding pressure from the advisors, church officials, and even her kin. The media, tightly controlled by royal decrees, offered muted reports, subtly hinting at her connection to Townsend without naming him. Communications between the lovers were scrutinized, their potential marriage options explored and quietly dismissed. Then came 1955, when Margaret publicly declared her refusal to marry Townsend, a statement cloaked in poise that hid a tidal wave of personal sorrow. Her dedication to the church echoed through the air, but beneath the facade lay a heartbreak shaped for public consumption. While the royal family expressed no regret over their role in this separation, biographies softened the harsh truths, leaving Margaret to carry the heavy weight of what love could have been, a haunting emblem of intimacy thwarted by silent pressures. She later wed Anthony Armstrong-Jones in a union many saw as a rebound, but the emotional scars remained, not just for her but for the watching world. In Margaret's struggle, the public glimpsed a more relatable royal, a figure yearning for authenticity in a restrictive realm. When that dream was extinguished, it was replaced by a chilling reverence for image over genuine connection. Yet, the monarchy's quest for curated appearances did not halt there, as it prepared for the next grand spectacle, a meticulously planned wedding that would mask a nation teetering on the edge of austerity, with the royal family spinning their fairy tale just a touch too intensely. November 20th, 1947, a day etched in history. Queen Elizabeth's wedding to Lieutenant Philip Mountbatten. It arrived at a time when Britain was still shaking off the heavy scars of the Second World War. Cities were remnants of their former selves, still reeling from the devastation of the Blitz. Ration books were a common sight, while coal shortages cast a pall over the dark mornings. Life had become a tapestry of austerity, where even ordinary existence resembled a challenge. Yet, amidst this somber backdrop, an event unfolded that almost felt surreal in its lavishness. The royal wedding was heralded as a beacon of hope, a celebration of love amid the ruins. For a nation in need of joy, Elizabeth's entrance from her royal carriage in a dress crafted by Norman Hartnell and adorned with 10,000 pearls ignited a sense of delight. Newspapers spun tales of national resilience, proclaiming this occasion as a symbol of recovery and unity. It appeared the royal family had orchestrated a gathering that spoke to the people, a genuine wedding for the masses. However, beneath the surface lay a carefully crafted illusion. The reality of this so-called modest affair stood in stark contrast to the grandiosity of its execution. It was among the most opulent events of the decade, funded in ways that few everyday Britons could comprehend, let alone aspire to afford. The true deception was not merely in the sheer expense, but in how the monarchy concealed the details of its lavish spending and even the contributions considered too extravagant to be mentioned. Take, for instance, the wedding gown. Officially, Elizabeth claimed to have used clothing ration coupons to purchase the fabric, just as any British citizen would. In truth, these coupons were supplemented with hundreds more from government reserves, alongside a public donation campaign that blurred the lines between patriotic duty and PR manipulation. Numerous women across the nation sent in their own ration coupons, inspired by a mix of eagerness and a perceived obligation. Many of these contributions were never utilized, while others were returned with polite notes from palace staff. This gesture, though generous, served a grander design, a display of royal pride over genuine transparency. Next, there were the wedding gifts, which officially numbered over 25,500, many sourced from foreign dignitaries and affluent benefactors. Yet, the intricate dance of diplomacy behind these offerings went largely unmentioned. Gifts arriving from controversial nations or dubious contributors were discreetly declined or left unrecognized. The items that graced the public display were chosen for their symbolic weight pertaining to unity and continuity. Behind this glamour, however, an undercurrent of dissatisfaction flowed among the British populace. Documents reveal unease amongst MPs and civil servants, voicing concerns regarding the appropriateness of such an extravagant event when the everyday citizen was still grappling with rationing and crumbling infrastructure. The decision was made. The royal family would cover personal expenses, while public funds would shoulder the logistical burdens of security, broadcasting, and transportation. As for the coverage, BBC's broadcast of the wedding was meticulously orchestrated. Cameramen were cautioned to avoid unflattering angles, while commentators were provided scripts that emphasized tradition and sentiment rather than financial implications. Any misstep was expertly edited out, ensuring that the portrayal was not one of excess but of dignity and grace. Yet, amidst this orchestrated narrative, many in post-war Britain felt a flicker of resentment. Why, in a nation striving to rise from the ashes, Did one family bask in opulence? Why was a wedding employed to mask the harsh realities of austerity with a facade of romance? Because the monarchy understood its reliance on ritual to redefine reality, needing the public to view the impending union not just as a joyful celebration, but a reassuring testament to the enduring power of the old order. In 1947, this old order wasn't merely about fairy tales. It necessitated an iron grip on media portrayal and public memory, especially as preparations loomed for the Queen's coronation just 6 years away. On June 2, 1953, a momentous event unfolded in Westminster Abbey as a young woman of just 27 stepped into the annals of history, emerging as Queen Elizabeth II. Cameras whirred, trumpets heralded the occasion, and the streets of London overflowed with tearful onlookers, clutching newspapers as shields against the unrelenting drizzle. For the first time, a British coronation was transmitted live, heralded as a pivotal turning point not just for the Queen but for the monarchy itself. However, beneath the polished surface of the event lay a complex tapestry of anxiety and meticulous orchestration, obscured from the public eye. The palace portrayed the coronation as an immaculate fusion of ancient ritual and contemporary media, a divine ceremony that secured the Queen's place in the hearts of the nation. Yet, the reality was far more fraught. Elizabeth, despite her youthful spirit, found herself weighed down by the gravity of her new role, grappling with grief for her father and overwhelmed by the spectacle she was about to partake in. Insights from palace insiders hinted a woman on the brink, emotionally strained and physically drained in the lead-up, with early rehearsals pushing her to tears and the grandeur of the solid gold St. Edward's crown bringing her to the cusp of migraines. The colossal scale of the affair, encompassing 8,000 guests and 6,000 troops, raised eyebrows among her advisers, who privately questioned the wisdom of such ambition. But all these tumultuous details remained hidden from the public gaze. They witnessed none of the chaos behind the scenes, the frantic briefings, the communication breakdowns, nor the silent struggles of those working tirelessly to prepare. The dramatic flourishes of the day presented a solemn, dignified ceremony, shaped by the palace's strategic presentation. The BBC's coverage, scrutinized by the royals, carefully edited out any hint of mishap or discomfort. Sacred moments, such as the Queen's anointing, were deemed too holy for cameras, while angles that could diminish her grandeur were strictly prohibited. Commentary underwent rigid vetting, with moments suggesting any form of error excised from rebroadcasts. Newspapers echoed the palace's narrative of unity and divine purpose, effectively silencing reports of logistical turmoil or public dissent, while rebranding the dreary reign as a fortuitous sign. Why all this manipulation? The coronation transcended the mere crowning of a queen. It was a bold statement asserting Britain's enduring strength and exceptionalism. The monarchy aimed not only to remain relevant but to appear unassailable in an ever-changing world. Ultimately, this performance solidified Elizabeth's reputation as a composed and chosen figure, paving a path for future royal events where perception trumped authenticity. A careful curtain fell over the truth, selectively showcasing only what the monarchy deemed fitting, especially concerning the Queen's own family, where even her husband's sisters faded quietly from public memory. In the year 1947, when Prince Philip united with Princess Elizabeth in marriage, the presence of his family at the wedding was astonishingly scarce. His mother, Princess Alice, graced the occasion draped in serene grey, yet his 3 surviving sisters were glaringly absent. There were no celebratory toasts, no mentions of their names, and no reserved spots for them in Westminster Abbey. Officially claimed to be unavailable, the truth was far more telling. They were uninvited. The reason? All 3 had allied themselves through marriage to prominent German aristocrats, some of whom had undeniable ties to the Nazi regime. For the British royal family, this connection posed a profound dilemma: not merely a family embarrassment, but a potential public relations catastrophe waiting to erupt. In the aftermath of World War II, as the nation grappled with the aftermath of the Blitz and sought to reinvent the monarchy as a symbol of unity, having relatives tied to the Nazis was more than just a bad reflection. It threatened to uncover scandal deep within the royal narrative. Philip's sisters, Margarita, Theodora, Cecilia, and Sophie, had married into the German nobility during the 1930s, forging bonds with influential figures entrenched in Hitler's regime. Notably, Sophie's husband, Prince Christoph of Hesse, was a high-ranking SS officer, serving directly within Göring's inner circle. Another brother-in-law proudly donned the Luftwaffe insignia. The chilling tale of Cecilia stands out, as both she and her husband, Grand Duke George Donatus, members of the Nazi Party, met a tragic end in a 1937 plane crash along with two of their children, a dramatic narrative almost too large to conceal. Yet, in royal literature and the British press, it remained largely unaddressed or presented as a distant family tragedy, glossing over the political affiliations and dark symbolism involved. As Philip prepared to wed Elizabeth, the palace discreetly initiated damage control. The British public remained largely unaware of his family, which is precisely how the monarchy preferred it. His German ancestry was repackaged as simply European heritage, and his sisters were meticulously erased from public discourse. Their names were seldom mentioned, photographs from Philip's past carefully cropped to exclude them. When British newspapers dared to reference his sisters, it was often with vague allusions that omitted any mention of their husband's notorious affiliations. Behind closed doors, anxiety reigned. Advisers deliberated on whether Philip's background might tarnish Elizabeth's public image. Some suggested postponing the marriage until more time had elapsed since the war, while others proposed the involvement of publicists to artfully manage the public's perception. Ultimately, the wedding proceeded, yet amidst sanitized guest lists and rigorous media management. Even as decades passed, with Philip solidly in his role as consort and public figure, discussion of his sisters remained a veritable taboo. Interviews bypassed their existence, obituaries only referred to them in the most indirect terms, and royal documentaries wove their narratives into forgotten footnotes. Only when scholars began exploring foreign archives did the complete story gradually unfold, a young prince navigating a world of fractured dynasties, where his closest family members stood on the darker side of history, obliterated to uphold the facade of a polished monarchy. The irony lay in the fact that had the truth been confronted openly, the British public likely would have comprehended, perhaps even empathized. However, within the House of Windsor, the image prevailed over the acknowledgement of honesty. And as whispers of doubt grew, in every corner of the empire, the crown's instinct remained steadfast: deny, deflect, and bury the past. This brings us to the next royal enigma, this time not hidden away in Europe, but in the Southern Hemisphere, where a single letter would unearth a constitutional cover-up that the palace denied for nearly 50 years. On November 11, 1975, the people of Australia awoke to shocking news. Their Prime Minister, Gough Whitlam, had been dismissed, not through the ballot box or a scandal, but by a singular figure, Sir John Kerr. As the Governor-General and the official representative of the Queen, Kerr executed a dramatic constitutional act, ousting Whitlam and replacing him with the leader of the opposition. This unexpected turn of events sent ripples through Australian history, and for many years, the accepted narrative was that the monarchy played no role in the crisis. The Queen, it was claimed, remained unaware, a neutral figure, simply fulfilling a ceremonial duty, and Kerr acted alone, invoking his constitutional authority. However, in 2020, the release of a trove of previously sealed documents, known as the Palace Letters, challenged this long-held belief. Far from remaining uninformed, These documents revealed that the palace was decidedly aware of the unfolding situation. Sir John Kerr had maintained regular communication with Sir Martin Chatteris, the Queen's private secretary, leading up to the dismissal. Kerr articulated his apprehensions regarding Whitlam's government and entertained the notion of removal, seeking the kind of advice that Chatteris provided with an artful combination of encouragement and a cushion of plausible deniability. One particular letter, penned just before Whitlam's dismissal, advised Kerr on managing potential fallout. It suggested that employing reserve powers could be considered constitutionally valid, provided the Governor-General acted swiftly and offered legal justification. While there was no direct order, it was undoubtedly a nod of approval. The Queen, though silent, strategically refrained from intervening, giving Kerr the confidence that any actions he undertook would receive royal endorsement post facto. Following the dismissal, the palace quickly worked to shape the narrative, portraying the event as a matter strictly for Australia, a legal nuance rather than royal interference. Yet, the evidence from the correspondence indicates otherwise. Rather than a neutral stance, the palace's involvement leaned toward orchestration behind the royal facade. The reaction to the revelation of the palace letters was explosive. Many Australians, including those not sympathetic to Whitlam, were taken aback by the monarchy's deep engagement in the affairs of a sovereign democracy. Supporters of the Queen maintained that her role was merely passive and reactive, but the documents painted a much darker picture, revealing a tale of subtle manipulation and a profound shattering of the myth surrounding a ceremonial monarchy. To date, the palace has refrained from offering any apology or formal commentary, leaving the incident a lingering source of unease within the Commonwealth. It serves as a stark reminder that even a figurehead monarch can still influence political matters from behind the velvet curtain. As Australia grappled with its democratic future, a different royal scandal was quietly unfolding in Britain. A clandestine affair that had been the subject of whispers for years finally came to light, threatening to fracture the fairy tale image of a beloved prince and unearthing a romance that the Crown had tried to control for far too long. The Charles and Camilla saga, a complex chapter stretching from the 1970s into the 1990s, unfolds like a gripping tale of hidden truths within royal circles. For nearly 20 years, the British public believed in a picturesque love story, but this was far from the reality. Officially, Prince Charles had united with the enchanting Lady Diana Spencer in a wedding that captivated 750 million viewers worldwide in 1981. A timid kindergarten teacher and the heir apparent, they seemed destined for greatness together, a tale woven with destiny and a tiara. Yet, beyond the lavish celebrations and polished public images, another bond lingered in the shadows, one that had begun long before Diana and endured long after her. It was the enduring connection with Camilla Shand, later known as Camilla Parker Bowles. Their romance blossomed in the early 1970s, nurtured by shared interests, aristocratic backgrounds, a passion for country living, and a mutual affection for one another. But palace protocols deemed Camilla an unsuitable partner. She was deemed neither sufficiently pristine nor regal enough to be an ideal match. Thus, when Charles embarked on naval duties, she wed Andrew Parker Bowles, a choice tallying far with royal expectations. Nonetheless, the ties between Charles and Camilla remained steadfast. In a candid reflection, Diana would remark, "There were 3 of us in this marriage," a truth obscured from public view and suppressed by a silent alliance among the palace, the media, and royal interests, an effort to shroud the affair from the public eye. Throughout the 1980s, as Charles and Diana's union quietly frayed, the facade of a harmonious royal partnership flourished in the public sphere, magazine covers teeming with smiles and celebrations. Behind this carefully crafted image, Charles maintained hidden communications and encounters with Camilla, meticulously shielded from public scrutiny through palace protocols. The reasoning was stark. The monarchy could not bear another scandal that might tarnish its image. However, the concealment was not to last. By the early 1990s, cracks in the narrative began to surface. Revealing biographies and sensational leaks pointed towards the simmering truth. Then came Andrew Morton's game-changing book, Diana, Her True Story, in 1992, which unveiled Diana's perspective and included her famous assertion about the trio within the marriage, an explosive revelation that sent shockwaves through the monarchy. The palace's fury was palpable, yet still, Charles's relationship with Camilla was publicly downplayed. Even following their separation and eventual divorce, the public's view of Charles remained tightly curated. He was, and would remain, the Prince of Wales, seen as the next king. Camilla was relegated to the shadows, her presence controlled, whisked away in separate vehicles and kept off guest lists, effectively erased from their royal narrative. As the calendar turned to the 2000s, gradual acknowledgement of their connection emerged, albeit only after extensive public rehabilitation efforts, charitable endeavors and staged appearances aimed at reshaping Camilla's image from a mere mistress to a devoted partner. Yet behind the scenes, the palace had spent years safeguarding the truth, striving to uphold a narrative of moral leadership and marital fidelity, a story that was becoming increasingly tenuous. As the drama with Camilla played out discreetly, the public was fed a shimmering illusion, a fairy tale union between a prince and a princess, two souls adrift in separate emotional realms from the very start. 24. The captivating fairy tale of Charles and Diana unfolded on July 29, 1981, at St. Paul's Cathedral. Picture a glass carriage, an impressive 20-foot train, a bride filled with nerves, and a prince who appeared to long for another place entirely. Publicly, the wedding of Prince Charles and Lady Diana Spencer was hailed as a modern-day fairy tale, with officials dubbing it the wedding of the century. The media often referred to it as storybook perfect, evoking a sense of destiny. Yet behind the shimmering facade, the reality painted a much different picture, one where magic was notably absent and the palace worked tirelessly to maintain the illusion. This union was more a political arrangement than a romantic one. As Charles approached his 33rd birthday, the pressure to marry weighed heavily upon him. The palace recognized his bachelor days were dwindling. Diana, still in her 20s and seen as an untouched symbol of aristocracy, was the ideal choice. On the surface, everything seemed flawless. However, the truth was far murkier. The couple hardly knew each other, and even before they exchanged vows, signs of trouble were apparent. Friends reportedly heard Charles express doubts about his readiness for marriage, while Diana, just shy of 20, exhibited hints of anxiety. Yet, with the announcement of their engagement, the royal machine sprang into action. Speeches were crafted, photo opportunities staged, and media attention meticulously controlled. The now infamous interview where Charles responded vaguely to being asked if he was in love was spun by the press as quaintly awkward, obscuring deeper implications. The wedding dazzled the public, but the relationship began to disintegrate even before the first slice of cake. Diana soon unearthed the truth. Camilla Parker Bowles, the woman Charles had adored for ages, lingered in the shadows of their union. There were secretive calls, inconsistent vacations, and gifts that hinted at an ongoing affair. Sharing her worries with the royal family, Diana met with silence. However, the palace didn't merely overlook her turmoil. It was actively crafting a captivating narrative. Each image captured, every article penned, every royal engagement was designed to perpetuate the illusion of a storybook romance. In 1983, their tour of Australia with baby William was heralded as a revival of royal charm, yet hidden from view were the heated arguments, deepening resentments, and isolation that plagued their lives. Those closest to them, the staff, the courtiers, and even the Queen, were all aware, but the harsh truth was concealed beneath an array of cheerful smiles and staged displays of affection. As Diana faced her struggles, the palace intensified its control over the narrative. When she ventured to share her feelings through careful interviews, the media was given subtle warnings to tread lightly. Any journalist daring to probe into uncomfortable territory faced swift discouragement from royal aides. Meanwhile, the enchanting myth of their royal romance continued to thrive, fueling sales of articles, memorabilia, and a sense of unified national pride. The irony lay in the fact that Diana's immense popularity surged not from the fairy tale but from its very unraveling. People resonated with her vulnerability, her pain, her authenticity, everything the monarchy struggled to represent. Emotional, spontaneous, and imperfect, Diana captivated hearts, and each attempt by the palace to control her persona merely exposed the underlying manipulation. Ultimately, the tale could not withstand the scrutiny, for fairy tales crumble when the strings become visible. And in 1989, those strings snapped loose. 2 private conversations were recorded and leaked, revealing the royal marriage as a meticulously maintained facade. Thus began the end of royal privacy, piece by piece, one recorded conversation at a time. As the sun set on the 1980s, the facade of the British monarchy began to crumble. For the first time, they faced not just whispers in the shadows but the loud, crackling clarity of tabloid radio. In 1989, 2 private conversations surfaced, igniting a scandal of unprecedented proportions, so scandalous that newspapers struggled to choose which was more outrageous. They dubbed it Camillagate and Squidgygate, as if that might soften the shocking revelations. Yet, no clever moniker could mask the truth. The public was now privy to the private struggles of their revered institution. First to erupt was Squidgygate in 1992, when a clandestinely recorded exchange between Princess Diana and an unidentified male friend, widely believed to be James Gilby, was leaked. This tape laid bare Diana's raw, late-night anguish over royal life, her crumbling marriage, and her profound loneliness. Gilby frequently affectionately referred to her as Squidgy. The tabloids revelled in the details. Headlines blared sensationally. The palace's response? Denials of privacy invasions and claims that it diverted attention from essential royal duties. Perhaps those claims held some truth, yet the tape also unveiled a desperate, isolated princess yearning for acknowledgement. Then emerged Camilla Gate, a 1989 phone call between Prince Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles, recorded secretly and leaked in 1993. This revelation was far more destructive. Unlike Diana's vulnerable outpouring, this call vividly illustrated the long-term affair between Charles and Camilla, laden with intimate and even absurd references. Charles spoke eagerly of his desire to be close to her, jokingly expressing wishes that crossed personal boundaries. This wasn't the voice of a man stuck in a cold marriage. Instead, it painted the picture of a man deeply entangled with another woman. The aftermath was swift and painstakingly controlled as royal aides raced to manage the fallout. The official media approach sought to downplay and redirect attention while discreetly threatening publications daring to print the complete transcript. Some complied, others did not. The Australian media's release of the full tape shattered the monarchy's attempts at suppression, thrusting the scandal into the spotlight. The monarchy scrambled to mitigate damage, framing Charles's comments as private banter while insisting that all marriages face challenges. Yet, the damage was irreparable. The myth of Charles and Diana's united front lay in tatters. The pretext that Camilla was merely a family friend vanished. It exposed the royal family's hypocrisy, demanding respect from the public while harboring profound dysfunction behind palace walls. This incident marked a critical juncture where royal privacy, once shielded by public reverence, faced relentless scrutiny from wiretaps and leaks. No longer could the Crown dictate its narrative without challenge. And as the royal family faced these revelations in the court of public opinion, cracks emerged not only in their relationships but even within the royal stronghold itself. The 1992 fire that ravaged Windsor Castle became a harbinger of change. Its smoke not only signified destruction but resonated symbolically, illuminating a deeper turmoil. The true battle, however, wasn't just the flames consuming timber, but the contentious struggle over who would shoulder the financial burden of restoration, further revealing the underlying tensions within the institution. On the fateful morning of November 20th, 1992, as the Queen and Prince Philip marked their 45th wedding anniversary, Windsor Castle was engulfed by flames. A careless spotlight leaning against a curtain inside Queen Victoria's private chapel overheated, unleashing a firestorm that swiftly ravaged the upper ward. As centuries-old artwork turned to ash and the royal residence crumbled, another fire ignited in the hearts of the public. Anger, not towards the accident, but at the aftermath that unfolded. The initial response from the palace shocked many. Taxpayers would bear the costs of restoration, amounting to an estimated $36 million in damages. Amidst a struggling economy, the royal household argued that Windsor was a state property, a national treasure, not merely the Queen's residence. Yet, the public disagreed. The monarchy faced a turbulent year, marked by scandals and separations, and now it seemed the Queen sought taxpayer funds for castle repairs while avoiding income tax herself. Outrage erupted as newspapers questioned why Britain's wealthy monarch wasn't covering her own expenses, and satirical programs depicted her as a detached landlord expecting public support. The real issue wasn't the financial burden, but the veil of secrecy surrounding royal finances. People yearned for clarity on ownership and the true wealth of the monarchy, and when answers remained elusive, growing resentment began to simmer. In response, Buckingham Palace implemented damage control. For the first time, the Queen publicly agreed to pay income tax on her private income, while Prince Charles pledged personal support for the restoration. To further appease the public, Buckingham Palace opened its doors for a fee, promising to allocate proceeds towards the repair costs. These actions, though portrayed as progressive, were born from pressure, not principle. This marked a pivotal moment in history. For the first time, the British monarchy was compelled to address public discontent regarding its lavish spending. And as fate would have it, just 5 years later, another calamity would challenge the royal family's resilience, pushing the monarchy into the depths of its gravest modern crisis yet. In the early hours of August 31st, 1997, a tragic event unfurled in the dimly lit Pont de l'Alma tunnel in Paris. A black Mercedes met with disaster. Inside were none other than Diana, Princess of Wales, her companion Dodi Fayed, their driver Henri Paul, and bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones. By dawn's first light, Diana was lost, leaving in her wake the fragile pretense that the royal family had learned from their past indiscretions. This moment would soon come to define a pivotal chapter in modern British history. Yet, for nearly a week, the royal response was marked by an unsettling silence. The official narrative presented to the public was straightforward. The Queen resided at Balmoral, safeguarding her grandsons, Prince William and Prince Harry, as the family mourned privately, choosing not to disturb the public's grief. While this seemed both respectful and reasonable, it was not the complete truth, nor was it the reality outside the gates of Buckingham Palace. In London, an outpouring of grief erupted. Thousands gathered to honour Diana, flowers accumulating like confessions of sorrow. In stark contrast, the monarchy offered nothing: no flags at half-mast, no public appearances, and no addresses from the Queen or senior royals. A questioning murmur arose from the crowd. Had the palace entirely miscalculated the public sentiment, or did they simply lack the capacity to mourn? Inside the palace, the atmosphere was fraught with turmoil. starkly different from the outward calm it projected. Internal documents and memoirs later revealed a frantic exchange between advisors, staff, and governmental powers. Some called for an immediate royal address, while others urged restraint, fearing an emotional display would be misinterpreted. Charles, aware of Diana's immense popularity, advocated for a swift response, but the steadfast institution, a slow-moving behemoth, found itself immobilized, paralyzed by its own fear of misjudgment. When the Queen finally spoke to the nation 5 days after the tragedy, the address was polished and rehearsed. She described Diana as a gifted individual. While it exuded dignity, it was evident this message had undergone numerous revisions, twisted through layers of bureaucratic caution. The palace sought to appear sympathetic without expressing vulnerability, yet in the wake of Diana's passing, the media machinery went into overdrive. Tabloids that had previously criticized Diana now changed their tone, framing the Queen's retreat as protective love for her grandsons, cleverly redirecting blame toward Dodi Fayed and his family. Meanwhile, the BBC was fed meticulously edited footage of the royal family attending church at Balmoral, their solemnity intended to signal mourning without overt declarations. Gradually, this version took root among the public, a belief that the monarchy had merely adhered to tradition, with the real fault lying in the public's expectation for a more overt display of grief. Yet, deeper in the shadows, insiders whispered an unsettling truth. This was a time of panic, uncertainty, and the grim realization that Diana's legacy threatened to eclipse the royal family itself. As the institution scrambled to uphold its authority, another royal figure was quietly embroiling himself in relationships so fraught with scandal that no attempt at public relations could mask the reality of the situation. The next controversy wouldn't hinge on conspiracy but on connections too glaring to disregard. Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein, a relationship unraveled. For years, Prince Andrew, known as the spare heir-turned-playboy, became a fixture in headline news. A Royal Naval officer, a helicopter pilot, and the former husband of Sarah Ferguson. Yet, his legacy was not built on philanthropy but rather on his extravagant lifestyle. A man seemingly unburdened by royal duty, he attracted attention for his glamorous parties, yachts, and romantic escapades. But as the new millennium dawned, the nature of his friendships began to emerge under a shadow of scandal, revealing links that were alarmingly inappropriate. This is where Jeffrey Epstein enters the narrative. The complexity of their friendship remains wrapped in a haze of half-hearted denials and legal battles, shrouded in mystery. What is indisputable, however, is that Prince Andrew, Duke of York, had a prolonged association with Epstein, a convicted sex offender whose influence and financial machinations stretched across the globe. For years, the royal family made concerted efforts to gloss over this troubling connection, insisting that their rapport was merely casual and that any social encounters were benign. Yet, photographs contradicted this narrative. Andrew was spotted strolling through Central Park with Epstein post-conviction, dining lavishly at Epstein's residences, and even welcoming him into royal functions, including a notorious birthday celebration at Sandringham. Each time the controversy arose, the palace deflected it as a mere lapse in judgment, dubbing it a regrettable association. At one stage, aides absurdly asserted that Andrew was working on rehabilitation initiatives for Epstein, painting their friendship in a light of misguided altruism. However, the real turning point came with a lawsuit filed by Virginia in 2019, accusing both Epstein and, by extension, Prince Andrew of grave misconduct. She claimed that as a minor, Epstein had trafficked her to Andrew, alleging multiple non-consensual encounters. In response, Andrew stanchly denied any wrongdoing, claiming to have no recollection of her, despite a photograph depicting him with his arm around her waist and Ghislaine Maxwell grinning in the backdrop. The palace's strategy was one of denial and distance. They maintained that Andrew was cooperating with investigations until US prosecutors publicly refuted that claim. The situation escalated dramatically with a fateful BBC interview in November 2019. Intended to salvage his reputation, it spiraled into one of the most catastrophic PR blunders in royal history. Andrew made dubious claims, insisting he didn't sweat and recalling an alibi of being at a Pizza Express in Woking. He failed to show any remorse for Epstein's victims, resulting in swift fallout. Charities severed ties, organizations distanced themselves, and the Queen had to relieve her son of public duties. Yet beneath the surface, the palace had long been shielding and deflecting scrutiny, hoping the scandal would fade away. It did not. When the lawsuit was amicably resolved in 2022 for millions, the royal family offered no acknowledgement, apology, or closure. The implications were far-reaching, revealing not just Andrew's reckless choices but an institution's ability to ignore the growing mountain of evidence against him. And as the royal family attempted to rebrand in the modern era, they encountered further challenges, this time involving a young royal in need of support, only to be met with a chilling silence instead of empathy. In 2021, a moment unfolded before millions as Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, sat down with Oprah Winfrey, revealing a harrowing sentiment that stunned the world. "I just didn't want to be alive anymore." This chilling revelation was compounded by the shocking response she received when seeking help from the palace. Nothing could be done. While the monarchy has publicly championed mental health issues, with Prince William, Prince Harry, and Kate Middleton initiating the Prominent Heads Together campaign, the reality within the gilded walls of Buckingham Palace was starkly different. Meghan's status as a biracial American actress mingling with royal heritage placed her on uneasy ground, her identity scrutinized and her actions analyzed by a media machine that failed to shield her. In her moment of distress, she was allegedly told that acknowledging her mental health struggles could tarnish the royal image. Viewed as a working royal, the idea of seeking psychiatric help was deemed potentially scandalous. Better to remain silent, they suggested. When Meghan's revelations reached the public during the Oprah interview, the palace's response was telling. Recollections may vary. This carefully crafted statement offered a veneer of neutrality while failing to directly address the gravity of her experience. Subsequent leaks hinted at an internal culture riddled with tension, reluctance to act, and a prioritization of tradition over empathy. The plea for mental health support was not only overlooked but suppressed, resulting in profound consequences. As Meghan and Harry distanced themselves from royal responsibilities and started anew in North America, the palace scrambled to reshape the narrative, labeling them as impulsive and emotional. However, the truth lingered just beneath the surface. A woman within those palace walls had sought help and was instead met with dismissive apathy. The portrayal of their exit as a mutual, amicable decision was another distortion, masking a struggle that unfolded behind closed doors during the Sandringham Summit, the meeting which charted their future. Yet, the complete truth of that moment remains hidden, waiting to be fully unveiled. Sandringham Summit, a hidden struggle. In January 2020, the unexpected news of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's decision to step back from royal duty sent shockwaves through the British media, coining the term Mexit. Yet, what lay behind this catchy phrase was a profound, bitter discord, one that unfolded away from the public eye within the walls of Sandringham House, a royal estate that transformed into the arena for a constitutional clash. Official narratives painted a picture of a serene resolution, portraying the Queen's gracious acceptance of her grandson's choice. The senior royals appeared united in their support for the Sussexes' quest for a new life distanced from the Crown's obligations. But in truth, the scene at Sandringham was far from diplomatic. It was a high-stakes negotiation laced with anxiety and mistrust. Prince Harry had hoped to negotiate a compromise, a hybrid role allowing him and Meghan to serve while seeking financial autonomy and privacy. Yet, upon his arrival, it was evident that the palace was unwilling to entertain flexibility. The Queen, backed by her closest advisers, firmly stated there could be no middle ground. You are either in the royal firm or completely out of it. Supporting this rigid stance was Prince Charles, albeit with visible hesitance. Meanwhile, Prince William, already nursing a strained relationship with Harry, was enraged, feeling blindsided and betrayed by the developments. Harry, arriving solo, made a poignant statement, as Meghan had already sensed the chill of disapproval. What followed was hours of heated debates over various proposals: part-time duties, adjusted patronages, and alternate funding, all ultimately dismissed. The institutional message was unmistakable: either leave unequivocally or don't leave at all. To the public, the portrayal was of constructive dialogues and mutual understanding, but insiders revealed a far less amicable atmosphere, a frenzy of confrontations, abrupt departures, and non-negotiable terms delivered with little opportunity for adjustment. Ultimately, Harry and Meghan lost their royal patronages, and Harry relinquished the honorary military titles he had worked hard to earn. They could no longer use the word royal in their branding and were cut off financially, despite prior assurances of gradual support. What the palace framed as a gentle separation was, in reality, a forceful expulsion meant to signal to future dissenters that royalty does not permit flexibility. It demands total commitment, traditions intact. Yet, in this drama, the palace sidestepped the deeper, uncomfortable inquiry. Why had two highly favoured working royals felt such a stifling pressure that they sought to leave? Instead of confronting these critical issues, the institution resorted to its usual tactics, deflecting and dodging, particularly regarding financial matters. Meanwhile, it sat on a hidden treasury, an empire of wealth amassed over generations, all of which had largely escaped the scrutiny it deserved. 31. Unveiling the Queen's hidden wealth and tax secrets. Throughout the majority of the 20th century, the British narrative painted a picture of a monarchy living in relative modesty, dependent on state allowances rather than on immense personal wealth. The tale that emerged suggested that the Crown's cost to taxpayers was less than that of a daily cup of tea, a tidy story, but one built on falsehood. For years, the royal family's vast private fortune was cloaked in secrecy, safeguarded by an intricate web of trusts and legal shields, effectively distancing their financial dealings from public view. At the center of this intricate system was Queen Elizabeth II, not as an isolated figure but rather as a monarch entrenched in a long-standing tradition of financial secrecy. Unlike any other British citizen, she was under no legal obligation to pay income tax for decades, and when the topic surfaced in Parliament or media discussions, the answer was consistently that royal finances were a private affair. Even during turbulent economic times in the 1970s and 1980s, the Crown continued to enjoy this cloudy constitutional exemption. In 1992, as public outrage erupted over the fire at Windsor Castle and rising concerns about royal expenditures, the Queen announced her voluntary decision to start paying income and capital gains tax. While this move was characterized as progressive and transparent, it actually allowed the palace to determine what constituted private income, thus exempting much of the royal estate's extensive earnings from taxation. Then came a pivotal moment in 2017 with the release of the Paradise Papers, which disclosed that the Queen's private estate, the Duchy of Lancaster, had invested substantial amounts in offshore tax havens like the Cayman Islands and Bermuda. Though these actions were legal, they raised ethical questions, especially for a figure expected to exemplify civic integrity. In response, the palace released a standard denial, claiming they were fully compliant with the law, but skepticism among the public and the media only grew. This revelation intensified pre-existing doubts regarding the Crown's true wealth, which some estimates placed in the hundreds of millions of pounds outside of the publicly owned Crown estate. This fortune included private art collections, vast landholdings, racehorses, and significant shares in top companies. Remarkably, the Duchy of Lancaster alone brought in over $20 million annually, all handled privately. Yet, the monarchy remains untouched by freedom of information laws, its financial dealings secured by an amalgamation of tradition and legal loopholes. No elected official enjoys complete oversight, nor does any government entity conduct a thorough audit. It is indeed a royal exception. When it comes to financial matters, the monarchy excels at maintaining an ordinary facade while adhering to an entirely distinct code. This polished exterior has begun to fracture, however, as former palace employees start sharing their experiences and revealing long-standing secrets. These revelations don't merely concern wealth, they illuminate the hidden costs of servicing the royal institution. What, one might wonder, transpires when staff express concerns the palace would rather silence? 32. Allegations of abuse and bullying among royal household staff. Behind the majestic facade of the British monarchy lurks a vast, unseen workforce, one that sustains the royal image not merely through pageantry but with tireless dedication. Hundreds serve within the royal establishment: chefs, dressers, butlers, private secretaries, communication aides, nannies, drivers, and couriers, all diligently at work, polishing and managing the monarchy's public persona. For ages, their presence was muted, expected to remain so. Yet, slowly, the otherwise serene surface has begun to erode, revealing a distressing reality that the palace has sought to suppress, a history of bullying, abuse, and toxic conditions that echoes through the royal corridors. This isn't just a recent phenomenon. Before Meghan Markle captured media attention, past employees had spoken out, oftentimes under a shroud of anonymity, detailing intense pressures, grueling hours, and an emotionally taxing atmosphere within the royal court. These accounts, buried in memoirs or softened through interviews, constructed a troubling narrative, one of authority that's unaccountable. The watershed moment emerged in 2021, when allegations surfaced against the Duchess of Sussex, asserting that she had engaged in bullying behaviour. The royal response was rapid. They initiated a private inquiry. However, they added a notable caveat: the findings would remain confidential. This was not merely a break from tradition but part of an entrenched protocol. Complaints from staff were channeled through internal systems insulated from legal scrutiny, devoid of the independent oversight typical in corporate or public sectors. The expenditures monitored under the sovereign grant do not extend to workplace culture. Staff members were shackled with confidentiality clauses, non-disclosure agreements, and a long-standing culture of loyalty that silenced their voices. In 2022, the palace announced the closure of the bullying investigation, yet chose not to divulge any results. No reports graced the public eye. No actions were taken against those involved. Effectively, the matter was buried. This shrouded secrecy irked both critics and supporters of the monarchy alike, viewed by some as an emblem of hypocrisy, where a royal could face allegations yet shielded by legal barriers. Others interpreted it as the palace's failure to safeguard its loyal employees, even those who served for years. Memoirs and exposés have since unveiled a wider array of experiences, not only regarding Meghan but encompassing generations of royals. Staff recounted tales of verbal abuse, humiliation, sudden dismissals, and ludicrous demands, ironing shoelaces or eking out toothpaste on toothbrushes. Most significantly, these narratives seldom made headlines, not due to their inaccuracies, but rather due to an imposed silence. To acknowledge a systemic issue within the palace would dismantle the perception of the royal family as kind-hearted stewards. The prevailing strategy remained unchanged: deny, evade, and quietly dismiss the accuser. Yet underlying every complaint and non-disclosure agreement lies a more profound inquiry. If this is the manner in which the royals treat those nearest, what other secrets might they conceal? The answer could well reside within the literature, specifically, in what those texts conspicuously omit. For more than a century, the public has received an understated portrayal of the royal family's true wealth, one that glosses over a sprawling, intentionally obscure empire of assets and influence, an empire that has never been fully reconciled. The true extent of the royal family's wealth unfolds like a shadowed narrative, often cloaked in the facade of grandeur, golden carriages, jeweled crowns, and magnificent feasts. Such splendor is what the monarchy eagerly showcases, suggesting that their wealth lies in pageantry and tradition, with only modest personal holdings supported by public scrutiny and annual funding reports. Yet this portrayal is merely a partial truth, for the true magnitude of the royal family's private fortune remains largely concealed, intimately woven into a tapestry of secret estates and offshore ventures that have, until recently, escaped thorough investigation. Consider the duchies, two vast holdings, the Duchy of Lancaster and the Duchy of Cornwall. Although thematically characterized as trusts, these are, in essence, untamed empires. The Duchy of Lancaster, managed by the reigning monarch, boasts prime assets, including lucrative London properties and agricultural expanses, yielding tens of millions annually. Meanwhile, the Duchy of Cornwall spans over 130,000 acres across 23 counties, untouched by taxes or public regulations, existing in a murky legal jurisdiction, generating income quietly and reporting only to the royals. And then there are Balmoral and Sandringham, not just family residences but wealth-laden estates gifted through generations, unscathed by inheritance taxes. Upon Queen Elizabeth II's passing, a privileged King Charles inherited these properties, with no tax incurred due to UK law favouring sovereign transfers. Yet even these remarkable assets merely skim the surface of the royal financial landscape. Investigative revelations, such as the Panama Papers and Paradise Papers, have pointed toward additional offshore ventures and hidden investments. The monarchy benefits from unique legal protections, operating outside the reach of the Freedom of Information Act, exempt from labour laws, land regulations, and specific financial disclosures. So, what does this intricate web signify? An air of uncertainty looms, with estimates of the royal family's wealth fluctuating dramatically, ranging from $500 million to a staggering $20 billion, entirely dependent on the metrics utilized. The palace remains reticent, issuing only vague annual expenditure summaries, while lucrative private portfolio and legacy lines remain cloaked in a veil of secrecy, firmly grounded in centuries of tradition. Why maintain such opacity? Because perception is paramount. The monarchy's existence hinges on an image of service and humility, and the notion of a billion-dollar royal family shielded from scrutiny clashes with that ideal. Hence, the monarchy cultivates an image of modesty, despite resting upon a financial foundation that most leaders can only dream of. Ultimately, this is the greatest enchantment of the monarchy. The crown promotes itself as symbolic, yet it remains profoundly material, wielding not just ceremonial power but structural and financial clout that thrives beyond the public eye.